It was anything but pretty in the Meadowlands, but the Seahawks find a way to get it done and win a third straight game in a comeback effort against the New York Jets. We're going to be breaking it all down here on our latest post-game edition of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Glad to be teaming up for our weekly post-game show with my co-host, Connor Benintendi, and a special thanks to all the 12s who are listening in. Whether you're in nearby Issaquah, Washington, or down in Santa Fe, New Mexico, we greatly appreciate each and every one of you for tuning in and making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week, or in the case of today, twice a day. Here on Locked On Seahawks. The Seahawks, for about 2 quarters, looked like they were going to get stomped out of the Meadowlands with a really rough start against the New York Jets, but the resilience continues to show for the Seahawks. They find a way to climb back in the game. 19 unanswered points later, they get a 26-21 victory to escape with their third straight win, and they gain a little bit of cushion in the NFC West standings, staying in first place. We're going to be taking a deep dive into everything that transpired, the good, the bad. There was plenty of bad in this game. And we've got game balls. We've got our 3 up, 3 down, stock watch, and much more. Brought your way courtesy of our friends over at FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started today. Now for your lead story here on our post-game edition of Locked On Seahawks. Well, that was not necessarily good quality football, but the Seahawks found a way to win anyway. A couple of special teams turnovers in the first half, ugly possession in the red zone early in the third quarter. There were so many miscues for the Seattle Seahawks that earlier in this season, I think would have led to their undoing. I think they would have lost this game if it was 4 or 5 weeks ago. But that idea of belief that Mike McDonald has been trying to instill since day one, replacing Pete Carroll, it seems like that buy-in now is starting to play out on the field. And whether you want to call it championship DNA or not, Connor, this is a game that I don't think very many teams in the NFL would have been able to overcome all the mistakes the Seahawks made in the first 2 quarters and find a way to win. And yet that is exactly what happened. And a lot of it's because there was one player out there having a historic performance. We'll dive into that a little bit more here in a bit. But the Seahawks found a way to get it done. 19 unanswered points from the second quarter on. Some of those coming on defense, some on offense, some on special teams. It was a collective team effort to crawl out of a 14-0 hole that they dug themselves. And again, you might not see this championship medal. I do, though. I see this as a game that very few teams would have been able to win. I don't care if the opponent was 3-8 coming to this game. You got Aaron Rodgers on the other side. You got a lot of talent on that Jets team. You're playing on the road, 10 a.m. Pacific time start, and you find a way to overcome all of your own self-inflicted adversity and find a way to win this game. And that is what championship teams do.
Yeah, there's the mantra, Corbin, that the Seahawks never play a normal game. And I think this was a perfect example of why the Seattle Seahawks have started to build a reputation for never playing a normal game. You talk about being down 21-7, Corbin. That was the biggest deficit Seattle's been in since week 8, that blowout loss to the Buffalo Bills. Things looked really bleak. You have the 2 special teams turnovers. You have a near third special teams turnover. You allow the kick return touchdown. You allow a couple more big returns on kickoffs. I mean, the special teams was absolutely horrendous. You talk about a game where a coach might be on the hot seat coming out of a win. It's pretty abnormal. But, I mean, Jay Harbaugh has to figure out what was going on today with that special teams unit, both in kick coverage and kick return. D. Williams and Laviska Shenault, brutal performances by them today, and then also again on the kick coverage unit. But they managed to come back from that 21-7 deficit, and it's mainly because of the pick 6 by Leonard Williams, and we're going to get to that, but just not even on the pick 6, just an incredible one-man wrecking crew performance. 2 straight games now, Corbin, that Leonard Williams has been by far the best player on the field and is making a case for being the best player on the Seahawks right now, even though there's a lot of other players on the defensive side of the football who are also making a case for being one of the better players on the Seahawks. But still, Leonard Williams turns the tide. And then I was telling you before the show, Corbin, that I just didn't have much faith that Seattle was going to get back into this game purely because that's a good defense that the Jets have. It's a very good defense. It's one of the top-ranked teams in the NFL in terms of defensive yards allowed in almost every single category, points allowed, all of those. And you have a very inconsistent offense in the Seahawks that we saw those inconsistencies again today, having 8 tries, Corbin, to pick up 4 yards next to their the Jets end zone. I mean, it was brutal to watch. It was really, really painful to watch. And then the most ironic thing is that they get the game-winning score on a 3rd and 1 from the 8-yard line, which is just, I don't understand the short yardage situations with this team, but either way, it all comes back full circle, and that's why I didn't have much faith. But at the end of the day, they managed to string together just enough plays to get it done.
And I was on the opposite end of the spectrum. I kept thinking, even when they fell behind 21-7, I'm like, you have all these fluky plays that are happening, and yet it never felt to me like the game had slipped away from the Seahawks. And it's weird saying that. And just to put some perspective here, Connor, after Laviska Shenault fumbled, that was the second kick return fumble the Seahawks had in the first half alone. It was 21-7 before that fumble. The Jets were set up to extend that lead to 24-7 or 28-7. And if they scored there, we're probably having a much different discussion. But then Leonard Williams drops back into coverage at 300 pounds, picks up the pass like he's a tight end, and then he's got a caravan of blockers out in front of him. Suddenly, it's 21-13, and they missed the extra point. It was blocked because, again, the special teams unit just couldn't do anything right most of this game. They continued to give points away to the Jets or give away their own points on special teams. And yet, like I said, time and time again, it just felt like, look, these zany plays, that really was the word to describe today. This was a zany game in every way, shape, or form. It was a lot of ugly football, and yet it was an exciting second half because of the way the Seahawks stormed back. And then the Jets tried to win the game on their final drive. Aaron Rodgers trying to show, hey, I've still got some bullets left in the holster at age 40, almost 41, turn 41 tomorrow. I'm going to find a way to get this done to the Seahawks defense, hold, serve. And guess who was at the center of it? Leonard Williams with a couple of sacks. This really was a game where it felt like all the guys that previously played for the Jets and the Giants that used to call MetLife Stadium their home stadium, that all of them had a little bit of revenge in this game. I thought Geno Smith played really well considering circumstances. I thought Ryan Grubb put him in some awful situations. We'll get to that later in the show, but felt like they were consistently putting him in tough spots. And yet when they needed conversions on 4th down or they needed conversions on 3rd down in the second half, he was finding ways to make plays through the air, and the Jets were getting after him. It's not like the pass rush wasn't there, but he was finding ways to get plays. Leonard Williams, Julian Love, both having huge games on defense. So those guys are all a big part of it, but it's just that championship medal that we're never out of a game. We always believe that we can win. And I don't think that this team necessarily was buying into that 4 or 5 weeks ago. I think there were maybe a few guys in this team that weren't buying into it that aren't on this team anymore. And you have seen that change in mindset, and it has really turned into a difficult team to beat any given Sunday, even when they are beating themselves, which they couldn't overcome earlier in the year. Now they are finding ways to do that because this defense is playing so darn well. I mean, you consider it, they gave up 14 points quick, but one of those, Leonard Williams, had a sack that got called away because of a face mask penalty. The other one was because D. Williams fumbled the ball carelessly deep in Seattle territory, and the defense was up against their own goalpost right off the bat. I think this defense just week in, week out right now, they are setting the tone for this football team, and that's what makes it exciting coming out of this. There's a lot of things to be looking at under the microscope, like they did terrible with this on special teams. The offense still had a lot of miscues, but at the end of the day, they made the plays down the stretch that they needed to, and that's what good teams do. Even when you aren't playing your best ball, you find a way to win.
Yeah, we're talking about Seattle being 5-0 now, Corbin, when they allow less than 300 total yards to the other team. And 3 of those 5 games have been over the last 3 weeks during this 3-game win streak. This defense has looked, and we talked about it last week after the win against the Cardinals, Corbin, this defense has looked almost unrecognizable from what we saw before the bye week. I mean, it really just has been a complete shift. They played well, I think, better than the numbers showed in that Rams game right before the bye week. That was kind of the beginning of the turn. But still, it has been even more of a change since the bye week hit and they came out of that bye week and obviously made some necessary changes. And I just love how you're starting to see guys like Julian Love, and he's been a leader throughout this season and last season, but now he's really starting to become that enforcer that I think we thought Rayshon Jenkins was going to be for this defense, Corbin. And Julian Love now just absolutely bulldozing offensive players time and time again. And it's awesome to watch because he's kind of become that pure hybrid safety that can really kind of be the deep coverage guy, or you can put him up in the box and he can be effective. And there's just so many things going for this defense right now that have been rolling so well. And again, today, the Jets scored 21 points, but only 14 of those were by the defense. I've been seeing some, just stuff on X and such of like, what do you mean stellar defensive performance? This wasn't a great defensive, mostly because of the 3rd and 26 that they allowed them to pick up. I get it. But still, overall, just an incredible defensive performance over especially the last 2 weeks and really this whole 3-game win streak. Offensively, Corbin, one thing to highlight is just that the Jets did sort of shoot themselves in the foot as well in the second half with the 10 penalties, and 4 of those penalties were on 4th downs on that last drive to help Seattle advance that drive. So really, when you do look at that last drive for Seattle on the game-winning drive, it was productive and it was impressive that they were able to get all the way down there and get that final touchdown, but they did get some assists. And I do think we have to take a hard look at this offense because the vibe of the defense and the offense just feel a little bit different. The defense seems like after every drive, they're rallying, they're all smiles, especially when things go their way. And it seems like so many times this offense is ending drives and everybody's just a little bit, they got some frowns on their face. And I think there's a different energy with the defense than the offense for the Seahawks right now. And I expected maybe more of that to get worked out following the bye, but this offense still has issues that they're going to have to figure out, especially if they want to be productive in the postseason, if they get there.
Absolutely. They are not where they need to be on offense. There's no question about it. And we'll have more time to tie up loose ends on that front as we dive into some of the individual performers from this game. When we come back, we've got game balls to dish out, offense, defense, and yes, special teams. There actually is somebody who deserves a special teams ball. We will get to that coming up next here on our post-game edition of Locked On Seahawks. This episode is brought your way by our friends over at FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action this holiday season on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get 100 in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You can bet on everything from Jackson Smith and Jigba finding the end zone next weekend when the Seahawks have their rematch against the Cardinals in Glendale, or Marvin Harrison Jr. getting a 30-plus yard reception against the Seahawks secondary. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Welcome back to the post-game edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined by Connor Benintendi, and a special thanks to all the 12s who are tuning in. And thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. Matching their longest winning streak of the season, the Seahawks get to 3 in a row, a 26-21 comeback win over the Jets at MetLife Stadium. It certainly didn't start off well for the Seahawks with all the special teams miscues, the missed opportunities on offense, you name it. The Seahawks did not open this game well, but they found a way to overcome those mistakes. And in the second half, they ended up erasing what was once a 14-0 and 21-7 deficit and turning it into a 26-21 victory. Let's get to our game balls. And as you mentioned, Connor, offensively, it still feels like something is not right with this offense. They just can't quite get over the hump. There were some things that I was encouraged by today, and yet at the same time, it feels like the flow of the offense isn't where it needs to be at. And I'm not necessarily putting this on the players at this point. It just seems like we are seeing way too many long developing pass concepts. And you don't have the offensive line to be able to do that consistently, at least right now. You don't have the line to protect Geno Smith in those instances. And the run game is still so inconsistent at best. There were some signs of improvement this week, but they still got a long way to go. That it feels like the flow of the offense, they can't really get everybody in sync right now. That being said, Jackson Smith-Njigba continues to deliver big games regardless of what happens on offense for Seattle.
Yeah, it's hard to stop picking him for my offensive game ball at this point, Corbin, because week in and week out, he's just becoming that guy. You see the numbers on the screen there. The 3 first downs are the biggest thing, Corbin, especially you have that key 4th and 6, which led to the field goal where Geno Smith, long developing pass play again, where JSN gets open on the double move, and it's 24-yard catch to pick up that 4th and 6. Crucial play to cut the deficit down to 2. And again, this just goes back to what we've talked about before, Corbin, that JSN is really emerging as the wide receiver 1. I think at halftime, DK Metcalf had only 2 or 3 targets. I mean, it was really to the point where DK Metcalf was becoming sort of an afterthought for a moment. And he's not been an afterthought the last 3 games, but it's just been the JSN show. And I think that Geno Smith has been showing that that's his new favorite target. And JSN's just creating so much separation between him and defenders. It's hard not to keep looking his way. And he's really been the most consistent player on this offense since they came out of the bye.
3 of his 4 catches went for 20-plus yards. So he had 3 explosives, one of them being that 4th and 6 conversion that Geno Smith threw off his back foot. And I was laughing at Mark Sanchez during the play-by-play during the game because initially he was saying Jackson Smith-Njigba saving the day, which – he did with the catch, but that was a hell of a throw too.
It was.
And we saw time and time again throws being made like that where the quarterback didn't necessarily have guys open and the play was structured where the pass rush was getting after him, long developing plays, a lot of plays where receivers weren't getting open, but Jackson Smith-Njigba still put together a really nice game. I'm going to go a little different direction with my game ball, though. Sometimes there's a player that jumps into the lineup that doesn't get a lot of chances, but he makes the most of those plays. And that is what Zach Charbonnet did in this game. When you look at the struggles that Seattle's had running the football, I mean, they only had 37 rushing yards in the first half in this game. So it's not like they suddenly had the light switch go on and they ran the ball effectively, but they were better in the second half. They averaged 4 yards per carry. Charbonnet got 4 carries in this game. It would have been 5. Now, listen, Solomon Thomas, that was a horse collar. You have to call that. That was clearly a penalty on that play. But that would have been a tackle for loss on one of those 4th down conversion opportunities, and it would have thwarted that game-winning drive that the Seahawks had. But they got extra downs. They get 3rd and 1, and you get to see that punishing style that Zach Charbonnet offers that Ken Walker III can't match in terms of being able to just play some bully ball. He ran over a defender. He bounced off a couple other tackle attempts. Next thing you know, he's diving into the end zone, and the Seahawks have the lead for the first time. He had a couple of nice plays in the passing game. There was a screen that was snuffed out, and he made a backpedal move real quick to make the defender miss and turned it into a solid game. I thought it was one of Zach Charbonnet's better games of the season, and it felt like the run game actually was clicking a little bit better today when they had Zach Charbonnet out there. And maybe it was because the between the tackle stuff was working better than I anticipated that it was going to in this game. But I thought Zach Charbonnet, the numbers are not gaudy, but I felt like he really made a difference down the stretch for the Seahawks, both running the ball and pitching in a little bit as a receiver. I liked what I saw from him in this game, and I felt like he had some game-changing impact, even if he didn't play a ton of snaps for the Seahawks.
Yeah, and I think I said it last week, Corbin, that I'm just starting to still wonder if Zach Charbonnet is almost a better fit for this offense than Ken Walker III. That's not to say that Ken Walker III might not be a vastly superior talent. It's just that with the way that this offensive line is currently and the inability to consistently create holes, you do have a situation where sometimes Zach Charbonnet's style of just not really thinking and just hitting the first hole that's available to him and just getting downhill as quick as possible, it's paid dividends for Zach Charbonnet in some of those short yardage situations. And we saw it, obviously, we're going to talk about Satawa Lamea laying the block on that game-winning touchdown, but you saw Zach Charbonnet right there just be decisive. One cut, hit the line, go through, and he's directly through all the second level straight into the end zone. So I did like what I saw from Zach Charbonnet. On the defensive side of the football, Corbin, we got to go to I'm going to obviously start with Julian Love. I know you have a guy you really, really want to talk about that we've already kind of touched on, but Julian Love, I talked about him before, Corbin. Just the enforcer side of things is what's really been standing out to me, the leadership that he's showing. I mean, you even saw on that the 3rd and 26 where the Jets nearly picked up the first down on one play alone. Reek Woolen was essentially walking at the end of that play. I know this is not directly related to Julian Love, but you saw Reek Woolen essentially walking at the end of that play, not closing out, and you see Julian Love immediately in his face just saying, come on. Like, that's not the brand of defense we're playing here. And I think that leadership is so huge when you're trying to build up this culture that this defense is having. And you obviously have the numbers, the 6 tackles. He has the crucial forced fumble on Breece Hall to get the ball back in a critical situation. I just think Julian Love is really becoming a guy for this defense that you want to lock him down for maybe even more than the 3-year contract that they just gave him, because he might be a future All-Pro at this rate.
Let's talk Big Cat. Julian Love played great. There's no denying. Most weeks, Julian Love would be an easy pick for player of the game. He forced a fumble. He had a pass breakup. Was playing really good football for the Seahawks. But Leonard Williams, listen, when Mike McDonald after the game said he is playing at an all-time elite level, I know there are fans out there. You might not have seen the stats that I posted yet on social media or in the article that I wrote. But that is not hyperbole. Leonard Williams is doing something the last 2 weeks that has never been done, at least dating back to 1970. When you look at the last 2 games, he's had 4.5 sacks. He had the pick 6 for 92 yards today. He blocked a field goal, an extra point, on the Jets' first touchdown drive. He's had 6 tackles for loss. You put those numbers together, and I looked up on Pro Football Reference, their span finder for games. You can do it 2 or more games. I looked in 2-game clusters. What Leonard Williams has done statistically the last 2 games has not happened since 1970. He is the only player that's done it. So, yes, this is truly a one-of-one performance. And then you would just look at today's game. The NFL Communications Twitter handle today posted that Leonard Williams is the first player since sacks officially started being counted in 1982 to have 2 sacks and a pick 6 and a blocked extra point or field goal in the same game. It hadn't happened since 1982, more than 40 years ago. So again, this was a one-of-one performance. He could have had 3 sacks because the one was called away from the face mask penalty. They ended up flagging and negating that sack, but the guy is just living in the backfield, and teams don't seem to have an answer for him. And now you got him dropping back, playing like he's a linebacker and picking off passes. I mean, that's a cheat code. And like he was saying, halfway to the field, I was looking for somebody to pitch to because I'm exhausted, but he found a way to haul that 300-pound frame, 92 yards for the score, get that man some much-deserved oxygen. And look, he is playing like a first-team All-Pro. It's amazing to me he's never been selected to an All-Pro team. It would be a travesty if he's not an All-Pro, the way that he is playing right now, because he is playing at a level we have not seen from any defender in the last 40 years. It's insane what he is accomplishing out there.
Yeah, it is. And I think that this is just a perfect defensive situation for Leonard Williams, Corbin. He's really starting to just catch his stride and find the full dominance that he's had really within him as a football player for his entire career, but it's really starting to show now. And he talked about it after the game, Corbin, just saying that he has a lot of freedom pre-snap to call things up front, create one-on-one situations for himself or other players. And you see that whenever Leonard Williams gets left one-on-one with an offensive guard or an offensive tackle, and he just runs them over and completely blows up the play. That's exactly the type of matchups you want to have for a guy like Leonard Williams. And if Leonard Williams has the freedom to be able to identify those things and make the adjustments, or whether it's just already there for him pre-snap, I mean, how do you contain that? Especially with all the players that Seattle has up front, it's incredibly difficult for offensive lines to deal with. And especially now that this pass rush is starting to come together and rush together, Leonard Williams just happens to be the one who's really, I mean, he's by far the best player on that defensive line. We know that. And he's really, really showing it at this point. And again, you talked about the pick 6, but I think I think the source that I was looking at said 17.5 miles per hour was his top speed on that return. That's ridiculous for a guy of his size. I mean, there was flying. You look at the offensive linemen on that same play. Look at how fast they're moving in comparison to Leonard Williams. They are not the same type of person. It's just incredible what he was able to do these last 2 games and today in particular.
And look, hey, we are usually busy breaking down on the show. We're looking at our stats and stuff, and we want our listeners to understand. We do occasionally peer at the comments, and I see a couple of you saying that Leonard Williams has to do a little more to be an all-pro. I vehemently disagree with you. Going into this game, he was top 10 among defensive tackles in pressures, sacks, and pass rush win rate. He was in the top 5 in 2 of those categories. And now you add in today, those numbers are going to be even better. Like, he is playing out of his darn mind right now. He's playing as good a football as anybody in the league. And, like, if you're an offensive coordinator, how do you deal with him? Because they're moving him around, and he can rush in a 2-point stance. He can play 3-tech, 5-tech. They're moving him all over the line. He's just creating so many problems. And it's opening things up for other guys, too. If you have to start doubling him up, it's going to open things up for the rest of that defensive line. He's playing great football. Real quick, this was a disaster piece for the special teams unit. It's really hard to imagine that a special teams player deserves a game ball. But I'm going to say this. Leonard Williams gets a special teams game ball because he blocked an extra point. And that's got to be part of the equation. But Jason Myers, it was 37 degrees. It was cold. There was a little bit of wind. That is really tough to kick the football weather-wise. He booted a 54-yard field goal, and I felt like that was one of the plays that kind of got the ball rolling a little bit for the Seahawks to really start climbing back into this game. And he was able to boot that well over the crossbar, probably was good from 58 to 60 on that kick. And in those weather conditions, I know there was an extra point block, but that's not his fault. It was the front line. They let the guy get in there and block it. I thought Jason Myers continued what has been a really good season, and he has been booting 50-plus yarders as good as any kicker in the game this year.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there's really not much more to add to that, Corbin, because truly it was an absolute nightmare on special teams for Seattle today. But you know what? I think I can't remember the exact number, but I believe he also set the single season Seahawks record for 50-plus yard field goals today as well. So again, we've been handing it to Jason Myers most weeks at this point because he's the easy.
He's been that good.
Yeah, he's been that good, and at that point we have to do it. And props to J-My. He's doing well this year, and he's probably putting together. Well, we know record-wise, he's putting together one of the better seasons by a Seahawks kicker in recent memory.
Let's shift our gears now to the 3-up, 3-down segment that we do each and every week. Our weekly stock watch, our winners and our losers coming out of this game. And listen, with how the Seahawks played in the first half of this game in particular, and some of the issues they had on offense that lasted throughout the game, there's plenty of candidates for both categories here. But let's start with our 3-up, the players that played well. And look, Seattle Seahawks making his first NFL start. It was the first regular season game he's even played in. There were mistakes. There was a critical false start penalty on 4th down and 1. Seattle ended up going for it anyway. That was right before Jackson Smith and Jigba came open on that pass from Geno Smith that you mentioned earlier. There were some mistakes by LeMay. It was his first game. You're going to expect that. I cannot wait for the All-22 to come out, though, Connor, because in particular, that touchdown run by Zach Charbonnet, LeMay had a pancake on that play. And they had some success running between the tackles in the second, third, and fourth quarter of this game. And I felt like a big reason for that was number 63. I thought he really endeared himself well as a run blocker in this game. And it got me kind of excited thinking about maybe that can be a catalyst to get this run game performing a little bit better. And maybe that's why he's starting over Christian Haynes at this point, because physically he was able to hold up against the likes of Quinnen Williams and Javon Kinlaw in this game. There were some missed blocks, certainly, but I thought he really did a nice job, particularly in the run game. And for his first start, hey, it's a building block potentially for this kid.
Yeah, I mean, he's a rookie in his first NFL start. He's not going to be perfect, right? And that's the thing. We can't sit here and lay into him too much for the mistakes because, like you said, Corbin, there really was, I think, more good than bad, especially just on that game-winning touchdown rush by Zach Charbonnet. Just a great block. I believe it was on Javon Kinlaw to seal him off, create that just enough of a crease for Charbonnet to squeeze through there and obviously get the 8-yard touchdown run. Really, really excited. The biggest thing with the difference between him and Christian Haynes, right, Corbin, was the strength wasn't there with Christian Haynes. That's what was being criticized, that he didn't have the power in the run game. And I think we saw a little bit of an improvement, at least a little bit of an improvement with LeMay today. So I'm excited to see that. And obviously Kobe Bryant on the defensive side of the ball, Kobe Bryant and Devin Witherspoon. These are guys we're talking about every single week. Last week, we had Leonard Williams, Kobe Bryant, Devin Witherspoon really as the 3 defensive standouts, right? And at this point, now you've got the same three to some degree. Kobe Bryant just continues to play excellent football. He's one of the better tacklers on this defense right now, Corbin. Open field tacklers. He is sure-handed. He is wrapping up ball carriers by the legs, and he is bringing them down quickly. And it's the same thing. Devin Witherspoon just bringing that fire continuously, being really who's powering this defense. These are two guys who are absolutely critical to the success of this defense right now.
And Devin Witherspoon was in the thought process for me until Leonard Williams got those 2 sacks late. I was considering Devin Witherspoon for my game ball on defense because I felt like he had that type of an impact. I mean, look, the Jets had some success throwing the football early in the game, but Davante Adams had 5 catches on 12 targets in this game. Garrett Wilson had 5 catches on 10 targets. They combined for barely over 100 receiving yards in this game. You will always live with that with 2 receivers of that talent and a healthier Aaron Rodgers throwing to those guys. You will live with that all day long. But there was a 2-play sequence with Spoon. I believe it was in the 3rd quarter. He started off with a tackle for loss on a screen on Xavier Gibson. And we saw Ernest Jones partially make that play with him deciphering that screen and coming up and forcing Gibson to cut back outside and then right into the hands of Witherspoon. But he was right there. And then the very next play, he stride for stride, and he is all over Davante Adams and completely eliminates the possibility for Aaron Rodgers to be able to sneak the ball in downfield. He tried to throw it there, but there was no way he was sneaking that ball in. That really encompasses this kid's all-around skill set. What we've seen from him, Kobe Bryant added that quarterback hit on Rodgers on the last 4th down play that forced the ball to be airmailed a bit and go out of bounds. The receiver wasn't open anyway, but it was great pressure off the edge on a safety blitz. Both these guys continue to play really good football, and they were both deserving to be on this 3-up as far as I'm concerned. 2 guys that in other games they might have been in consideration for a game ball, but then Leonard Williams and to a lesser extent Julian Love happened. On the other side of the equation, there certainly were some players and coaches that deserve to be discussed a little bit here. Listen, I don't have it on the graphic. We're going to talk special teams in a moment, but real quick, I want to mention Ryan Grubb because I think when you look at that stretch early in the 3rd quarter when Seattle had 8 plays inside the Jets' 5-yard line, they tried to run the ball only 3 times during that span. There were no attempts at a quarterback sneak when they were inside a yard from scoring. They didn't even try to do that. And the 4th down play call, Geno Smith got a bad snap to him that kind of set things up for failure there. But the play call in shotgun from a half-yard line and allowing multiple rushers to come after him, what was he supposed to do there? There was absolutely nothing he could do there. I thought the play calling in that stretch, those 8 plays, was absolutely atrocious. And there were too many stretches in this game where we saw long developing pass plays that this team does not have the offensive line right now to be able to run. And they're consistently trying to do stuff like that. Your quarterback can only work with what he's given in that case. And when you've got Charles Cross getting blitzed by McDonald off the edge and he gets a sack inside a second after the snap, or then you have plays receivers aren't open and then Smith's got to hold on to it because you have these long developing routes. I saw some positives in the run game. I'm not going to completely pan Ryan Grubb, but look, both he and Jay Harbaugh as first-year NFL assistants, there's still much left to be desired where those guys are at right now and where they need to be for this team to be able to make noise in January.
Yeah, on Ryan Grubb in particular, just to touch on him briefly before we get into everybody else, because you pretty much covered most of it there, Corbin, but yeah, there's more left to be desired in terms of what his decision-making, especially in short yardage situations. What makes no sense to me is that it seems like when the Seahawks are in a short yardage situation, say, for example, that 3rd and 1 from the 8-yard line that turned into a Zach Charbonnet touchdown, when they don't need it, it seems to work. And then the moment they need it and it's a do or die situation, there's a questionable call or some form of execution-wise that just doesn't work out. I mean, you talk about that Geno Smith sack that ended up essentially being a touchback after on the 8th play near the red zone. And you just have Geno Smith on a straight sprint out to the left, and they just blanket the entire end zone. Where do you expect Geno Smith to go with that? Everybody's moving to the left. It is very questionable, and I can tell you want to say something else, so I'm going to throw it back over to you, Corbin, but it is bizarre, and it seems like it should not be that hard.
When you get gifted a first down at the 1 yard line, and it was the correct call. It was pass interference against DK Metcalf in the end zone. When you get gifted 4 snaps inside the 1 yard line, you should never be in shotgun. That is my opinion, and maybe I'm an old man yelling at a cloud saying this, but like, you should not be in shotgun in that situation. You need to get under center, and I thought Grubb did a better job today as a whole, getting under center more. But that stretch, what are you doing there? There were multiple plays they were in shotgun. And look, like I said, there were some things he did that I thought were improvements. You can see some adjustments, but there's some other things like the long developing plays. Like, how long do you have to see this offensive line can't block for stuff like that consistently before you realize I've got to emphasize the quick passing game more and let Geno Smith go to work with that quick release? And the run game is going to be much more effective under center in those short yardage situations. So, yeah, I just I don't have any hair to pull out on my head, but if I did, I would have been ripping it out with the way that goal line stretch happened there. And the kick returners, the fumbles, you got to do something with D. Williams and to a lesser extent, Laviska Shenault at this point. Look, D. Williams has not been able to consistently field kicks and punts. I defended him early in the year because he was an undrafted rookie that had a really good college career, and I think he's got some ability. But, like, you got to punish somebody when they're not holding on to the football consistently, which he's not doing. And I think it's Kenny McIntosh time. Somebody's got to be back there. And Shenault today had 2 bobbles. I'm opening up competition there and saying who wants to catch and be able to hold on to the football. That matters more than anything to me on kick and punt returns. I think you got to open that up if you're Jay Harbaugh, who is very much going to be under the microscope because his special teams in general, giving up a 99-yard kick return for a touchdown, they just looked really bad today for the most part. And that reflects on the coach when it's an entire unit that is struggling.
Yeah, D. Williams at this point, again, like you said, Corbin, I don't have any room left to defend him because I want to, but this is a guy who should have just been a developing potential cornerback option on the practice squad at best, I think, because there's just not, I mean, what is he showing positively? He's not returning, even when he is holding onto the ball, it's not like he's doing well in returns. He's not getting big chunks of yardage. Like where's the risk to reward of putting D. Williams on the field at this point? I really don't see it. Laviska Shenault, I thought, has been pretty solid throughout the year, but today I think he's just had a bad day. And again, Kenny McIntosh, I would much rather see Kenny McIntosh with what we've seen him do in the preseason just as a running back. See what he can do in the kick return game. Like, why not? Especially if you're going to keep a roster spot for him anyways.
Or Derek Young. Make Derek Young active and let him play back there.
Right, exactly. If you have the roster spot already full, just put somebody else out there. I don't know. D. Williams doesn't have enough there. And I think if we're tying this back to Jay Harbaugh, it's just he either needs to make decisions, better decisions in general of what his personnel is, and he also needs to do better getting the kick coverage together because the kick coverage was horrendous today as well. Last thing, Josh Jobe. We've been praising Josh Jobe a lot, Corbin, and I think it's been rightfully so as a real sticky corner. He just had a really, really bad day today. I liked his fire, talking some smack to Davante Adams, but overall, just he was getting burned. I don't know what the numbers fully look like in terms of catches allowed versus yards, but he was getting burned consistently, so much to the point where they started having to shade Julian Love over, give him safety help over the top because he was just getting torched, and it was just a bad day for Josh Jobe.
And in his defense, I mean, Davante Adams and Garrett Wilson are 2 really good receivers, and he had a couple throws late in the game against him that he had blanket coverage that Aaron Rodgers not able to complete. So I thought you saw some improvements there, but yes, there certainly were some issues. But again, you didn't give up a ton of catches to Davante Adams and Garrett Wilson this game. I don't think you can point at the secondary very much in this game and have too much to complain about. There were a few plays that got beat, and it's going to happen when you're playing receivers of that caliber. Nonetheless, it was a step back compared to his previous games and what the expectations now are for Josh Jobe. As always, you can follow me on X and Blue Sky at Corbin Smith NFL. You can follow Connor at CJohn Benintendi. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On Seahawks on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast to make sure you don't miss a single episode. Coming up tomorrow, I'll be teaming back up with Rob Rang. It's going to be a fun-filled Monday Musings episode. We're also going to open up the mailbag and tackle your listener questions. Make sure that you're listening in. Enjoy the rest of your Victory Sunday. Go Hawks.